Hybrid heroes inside Marvel Rivals can allow you to pick up the slack when your teammates are underperforming in their specific role. Now, there's plenty of hybrid heroes inside Marvel Rivals, but we're going to go over the 6 most important ones, especially for Season 4.5. So what is a hybrid hero? Now, a hybrid hero performs well within their own role, so whether they're a duelist, strategist, or vanguard, but also can act within another role and perform, and even in some cases excel relatively well depending on your team's needs. So if you need extra firepower, whether you need extra protection, or whether you need extra healing. Now, our first hybrid hero is actually Mantis. Now, what Mantis can actually offer, especially in Season 4.5, is actually a lot, but her hybrid is between a strategist and a duelist hero. Her damage output easily rivals what a duelist can output in this game. Granted, you do need to be good at hitting your shots, and it is projectile damage. However, Mantis's damage output is absolutely incredible. Now, her healing output is not the strongest. However, it's not her healing that is going to allow you to win the fights. It's actually her damage boosting, and damage boosting inside Season 4.5 is so powerful that you actually won't understand that it's so useful to make sure you win fights and get those final hits in, especially when Mantis damage boosts herself. It's actually insane amounts of damage she can actually deal. Not to mention that her ultimate is one of the best support ultimates in the entire game, especially now that they actually buffed it with the couple of updates that we've had, and it just makes Mantis feel super strong for this update. And if you need that extra damage output, you feel like your DPS are not quite outputting the final hits that they need to win you the fights, then not only are you able to damage boost them with Mantis to make sure that they perform that slight bit better, but you can also just deal the damage yourself as well. And then you've got a support ultimate to keep you alive off the back of that. So overall, Mantis is super strong. And not to mention, she's got one of the better team ups in the game as well with Loki and Groot, and I feel like that is incredibly powerful as well. In a similar way, we have Ultron, again the duelist strategist hybrid, and Ultron basically fully embodies this. Especially when it comes to his damage output. I think if you're able to consistently land shots with Ultron, you could be some of the most powerful heroes in the entire game. Now, when it comes to his healing output, it's actually not too bad. They did nerf it in the previous update. However, even at that, you can still counter some pretty strong abilities with his overshield ability and also his healing drone. Now, the healing drone is there to keep your tanks alive. It's not going to kind of give them burst healing, which is what is required from another strategist. But if you are pairing him with any other strategist in this game, you're going to be able to do really well. Now, another thing why he definitely works well as a DPS is because not only does his ultimate heal his teammates, but also deals damage to enemy players as well. So overall, as long as you're blasting that AoE damage down to the enemy, you're also healing your team too. And then the team up is also a kind of similar idea too with Iron Man. So the next and probably the most obvious one is Mr. Fantastic. Now, we all know he essentially inflates into a pseudo vanguard, and that ability in and of itself makes him pretty powerful in the front line. But if you combine that with his penguin mode, which basically allows him to be invincible for a couple of seconds as well, and rotating between these two abilities on and off cooldown, just makes him incredibly powerful at staying alive in the front line. Now, his damage output is not quite as strong as some of the other duelists in this game, but that is not really his role anyway. And when it comes to his other abilities, such as kind of bumping into his teammates, giving them a little bit extra overshield, this is so helpful, especially to other tanks in this game, to keep them alive just a little bit longer, especially if they're not getting healed up by any of the strategists. So having Mr. Fantastic in your front line is always something that you're going to be happy with if you're playing Vanguard. And if you only want to run a single Vanguard setup or team comp, then having a Mr. Fantastic in your team is definitely going to help support that Vanguard. And overall, I think he's a really strong pick, not to mention that his ultimate also grants him tons of overshield that you can kind of pop at a moment's notice and kind of keep yourself alive within the fight as well. Next up, we have Blade. Now, Blade is definitely a duelist pseudo Vanguard. This one's probably not as obvious as Mr. Fantastic. However, Blade can definitely fit that role. And the reason for that is because not only is his base HP the highest out of all the duelists in this game to date anyway, he also has a block ability which is incredibly strong. It blocks 80% of the damage that's coming in, which I know it's not blocking all the damage, but that is a pretty strong block. If you time it well, it also blocks some ultimates as well, like, for example, Scarlet Witch. And I think that just makes him incredibly powerful. Any teammates that are standing behind him whilst he's also blocking will take no damage as well. So essentially, he's one of the only duelist heroes that actually has a shield to block incoming damage, which I think is pretty powerful in and of itself. Then he also has his reduced healing capabilities, and when he hits the enemy with reduced healing, and if you are a Vanguard, and most Vanguards by the way don't output nearly as much damage as a DPS hero or even some of the strategists in this game, this is a welcome combo because it allows you to get some quick finishes, almost similar to a Mantis damage boost. This can be incredibly useful to stop the enemy team getting healed in the front line whilst your Vanguard are picking up the extra kills. And I think that combo works extremely well, especially since Blade is essentially a brawling hero anyway, and he should be in the front line. Next up, we have Thor. Now, for the most part, Thor does embody what it means to be a Vanguard. However, he can definitely be played as a duelist as well. Now, a couple of reasons for this is because, first of all, he does output some insane amounts of damage, especially when he's in his Awakening Rune form. If you're in the Awakening Rune, you actually can output some more damage than some of the DPS in this game, which I find pretty crazy, but he's also got a lot of tankiness to him as well, which definitely makes him very useful. His mobility is actually not too bad as well, especially when you're dashing into enemies and also displacing them. And now that his ultimate got a slight buff, it can be used to deal damage to some enemies and get some quick finishes, although it's not quite as powerful as DPS ultimates. But the main reason you want to be using Thor is the fact that his downtime is almost zero. He's always going to have an ability available, almost similar to Daredevil in a way, because the way his hammer throws actually work and getting them back quite regularly. So his downtime is almost zero. He does output a strong amount of damage in Awakening Rune, and that means you can essentially spam this Awakening Rune ability constantly to deal damage to enemy players, and that's what makes Thor incredibly strong. You can displace enemies, you can kill enemies, and you can combo him really well with other DPS heroes as well. Lastly, for our hybrid heroes, we have Angela, and in my opinion, Angela probably was meant to be a DPS hero. However, they changed it last minute because we were all waiting for a new Vanguard potentially. But when it comes to her kit and just overall based on how low her HP is compared to other Vanguards in this game and her abilities, she essentially acts as a DPS dive hero. She goes to the enemy backlines, she's got tons of movement, she can displace enemies, and she can essentially brawl. Now, all of these capabilities are very useful, but she's not played like a traditional tank. She's not making tons of space unless you're knocking enemies out of position. Obviously, you can use her like that, and that is where her tank essence comes from. However, if you are trying to use her as a duelist hero, then you can essentially kidnap an enemy, brawl with them, kill them, and then use your shield to block any incoming damage, and then leave. And that is essentially what a burst duelist does, similar to a Black Panther, a Daredevil, an Iron Fist, you name it. Angela almost plays in a very similar way, and that is why traditional tanks don't like actually playing with this hero. So she does play very different to tanks, and also when it comes to her ultimate ability, it actually deals a lot of damage while sticking enemies in place, and it allows you to combo your other abilities on top of that as well. So overall, Angela definitely acts like a DPS hero, especially when she's on the ground using her axes. You can deal tons of damage with that, and if you charge up your spear enough, the amount of damage you can get from that spear attack whilst comboing some melees is actually pretty powerful if you actually think about it. So there we have it. Those are 6 of the hybrid heroes for season 4.5 that you definitely want to use if your team is struggling in each of those areas. Hopefully this video allowed you to think about these heroes slightly differently and maybe support your team when they need it. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, don't forget to subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.